Okay, so I also want to talk about Romans 10. This chapter is often misunderstood as well. And for they being ignorant of God's righteousness and going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. Um, yeah, I would say that Paul is exactly right here. A lot of people are ignorant of God's righteousness, and so I hope to show you that in this video. Uh, I would take you to Deuteronomy 6, where Jesus quoted the greatest commandment, and the very last verse, and it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do all these things before the Lord our God as he has commanded us. So that's God's righteousness, doing his commandments. Now, a lot of people will say, well, Christ is the end of the law. Well, I would like to take your attention to this word for end here. It's telos. And it can mean end. It is translated that way a couple of times. But it can also mean a goal, like the bullseye of a target. If you've ever heard anyone talk about sin in the Hebrew being hamartia, I think. Man, now I'm gonna whiff it. But anyways, the Hebrew word picture is an arrow shooting, or is an archer shooting at a target, to hit the mark, and then sin is missing the mark, missing the bullseye. So telos, meaning goal, is a little bit different than end. Gives us a little bit different context whenever we can see that Messiah is the goal of the law of righteousness to everyone who believes. So we know that Jesus did it perfectly, and granted, we're never going to do it perfectly, but the goal is to be like Messiah. A little bit different. Fun fact, telos is also where we get the word telescope. Does a telescope end something? Nah, telescopes don't end anything. They magnify, right? Well, there's this curious little verse in Isaiah 42, verse 21, where it says that the Lord will magnify the law. There we go. That gives us a little bit better understanding of Romans 10, wouldn't you say? This telos word that they wanted to use, magnify. Now, if that won't do it, they'll usually quote the rest of this, and they'll say, Moses describeth the righteousness which is of the law, but the righteousness which is of faith speaketh this way. Okay, so I just want to show you this, that the righteousness of belief that he speaks of is also quoting the law. So this Greek word for but here can also be translated as also and moreover. So you really have to use context to figure out how the word should be translated. And so seeing as he's quoting the law in both places, we can see that it's not opposing ideas. So but would be better translated as and. In fact, he's quoting the Torah or the law the entire time, even up to verse 8, where he says, this is the word of belief or faith that we preach or proclaim. So this but should also be translated as and, because everything in these entire 4 verses is coming from the Torah. There's nothing new here. These are Old Testament quotes, and therefore cannot be opposing ideas. Therefore, we should not see the word but here. And then if you confess with your mouth, believe in your heart, all that good stuff, the fake prayer or sinner's prayer. It's not really in Scripture, but people still try and say it is. But I wanted to show you the Scriptures 2009 here because it shows all of the verses that Paul is quoting. I mean, almost this entire chapter is Paul quoting the Old Testament. Literally, almost every verse. Okay. And then the heart, believing, all that good stuff. This is nothing new either. This is back in Deuteronomy 4. This is actually one of my favorite places to take anybody. I mean, this would be, the gospel. But from there you shall seek Yahuwah with all your heart and with all your soul, and you will find him. So, yes, believing first in your heart is the first step. And it doesn't matter if you do it in your tribulation, even in the latter days. You shall return to God and shall obey his voice. So yes, heart first. Your heart changes, that heart circumcision. And then you turn to God and start obeying. It's a two-step process. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video on Romans 10 and how Paul is once again in step with the law and not preaching against it or teaching that it is finished.